Junkies, welcome to this review of the Fantastic Four First Steps. Or maybe it should be called The Fantastic Four Takes Baby Steps. This is a reboot, this is a revisit. We had the Fantastic Four before. I'm not going to talk about who they were or what it was like. I just wasn't into it all then. I wasn't into this stuff then. Anyway, I'm not here to talk about the old iterations of the Fantastic Four. This is the new, the latest one. The brand new Marvel Cinematic Universe coming hot off the heels of a very well received, and I thought brilliant, though kind of it's only doing middling at the box office, Superman from James Gunn. A lot of people accusing it of being woke. I thought it was a Superman with a heart rather than just pecs and abs. This comes at the same time, and I think there is a kind of connection between the two. I think there's as the opening credits for this film started, I thought, oh, there's a sort of strange superhero nostalgia thing going on here where it's about feeling comforted and about harking back, actually, I think in both instances, but in very different ways, to the original artistry and original comic book source material. This film, very much set within a sort of 60s version form of a futuristic New York, which is kind of liberating for the production design on this film. Allows them to be futuristic, but it also allows them to indulge in that kind of 1950s, 1960s Mad Men, you know, that show sort of aesthetic. Superman did something similar, but it was very much parked in the now. It was all high tech and everything, but its kind of story arc and the way in which it covered in terms of shots and editing of various action scenes in the Superman film were very like, again, I feel, the comic book, you know, the actual templates, the pages of the comic book and the boxes and all that kind of stuff. It's got quite a stellar cast. It's got Pedro Pascal in there. We've got Vanessa Kirby in there. Pedro Pascal plays Mr. Fantastic. Vanessa Kirby plays Sue Storm. Joseph Quinn, hot off the heels of A Quiet Day, Day One, or was it A Quiet Day, Day One? Joseph Quinn's in there. Ebon Moss-Bachrach plays The Thing, aka Ben Grimm. And also notable in this is Julia Garner playing the Silver Surfer, or Shalabel. I used to have a bit of a thing about the Silver Surfer, though back in my day it was a man. Well, it was a kind of humanoid. It was just like a shiny... I always thought that a Silver Surfer wasn't made of silver, even though the clue was in the name. I always thought they were sort of made of mercury. And Ralph Ineson is the voiceover artist, though maybe he strapped on the outfit of Galactus. I have to say from the get-go, this started and I was like, oh, I like the fonts, I like the titles, I like the music, I like the use of kind of television, you know, era-driven archival television and all that kind of stuff. Oh, I like Mark Gatiss playing the TV host of a TV show. This is 1960s, though of course it's not a real 1960s because it's Marvel 1960s. In fact, I think it's year 864 or something like that. And so we got into it and I thought, okay, well, what are we going to get here? Sort of a la The Incredibles. I think the Pixar, you know, film franchise, The Incredibles, sort of was heavily inspired, wasn't it, by the Fantastic Four. And I have to say, going back to the comic books, for me, as I look around my room, I can see a few copies of original, old, antique copies of the Fantastic Four. It's a great design. The font and the thing is always such a kind of, you know, smash 'em up type of orange, crumbly, blocky thing. He's quite a cool design. There's something inherently cool about the Fantastic Four, and I think this film, before I sort of lay into it and get into the details of it, I think this film does a very good job of pictorially, visually, everything that washed over me was entirely stimulating and entirely right, I think. I really enjoyed it. I like the design of it. I like the look of it. I like the immersiveness of this form of 1950s futuristic New York. I bought into it. Some real care and attention was given to even the little robot that's sort of part of the family. And then we get into the kind of setup of them as a family, a sort of odd family, because the whole film starts obviously with Vanessa Kirby and Pedro Pascal, Sue Storm and Mr. Fantastic. You know, she comes in, she's basically, this is a Marvel film that starts with Vanessa Kirby pissing onto a pregnancy test, and she's going to have a baby. That's so exciting. And Joseph Quinn, is Joseph Quinn her brother? Is the Human Torch her brother? And then his mate, Ebon, played by Ebon, you know, the Thing. They all kind of live together. But the weirdest thing happened with this film was really early on. I don't know if anyone else has got this, because it's rating really well on Rotten Tomatoes. The audience score is high. The critic score is high. And I just was surprised that within the first 10 minutes, And we always do honest reviews here. So I've said, well, I really like the look of it. I was really on board with this. This was like, yeah, everything was ticking all the right boxes. There seemed to be a sort of anaesthetized, slow, disconnected and muted performance from actually all four of them. And I can't work out why that was. First of all, let's start with Pedro Pascal as Mr. Fantastic. He's the stretchy one, you know, and you don't see too much stretchy in this. And I don't know whether that was partly because I felt on some of the rendering of the CGI, it didn't quite look up to muster. And I wonder whether in the extreme close-up of the edit, when they looked at his stretchy scenes, it wasn't particularly convincing. So we didn't get a huge amount of his skills. Vanessa Kirby, Sue Storm, she's the invisible one. I mean, I have to confess, the Fantastic Four, I'm not particularly enamoured with their superpowers. And this does a good job of sending them into space. It's all archival footage. It's all like news on the march. It's all very 1950s. I loved all of that. I loved all the kind of era setting. I loved the kind of, you know, the archival TV, old-fashioned, smashed-up TV footage of them all getting on board the plane, and it's in the trailer, and they all on board the plane, on board the spaceship, and they go into space, but something happens to them, and they all come back, and they've all got these strange powers. I liked all that. I thought it was a very economic telling of their origin story, but getting into this is a film that succeeds or fails based on the kind of ensemble energy, I think. And quite quickly, I thought, I mean, I'm a big fan of Pedro Pascal. Don't get me wrong, I love him. I mean, I just want to grab his face and just grin at it. He seemed really muted. He seemed really boring and flat and low key, and he wasn't it didn't feel real at all. He felt very much like he was, and at one point I was even thinking, is he trying to convince us that his character, there is a moment or an exchange between him and Sue Storm where he says, you know, that's what I do, I try and work out the problems. And I thought maybe Pedro Pascal has taken the line in terms of his character that he's slightly, maybe, I don't know, on the spectrum or something, and so he's laser focused on the science, almost not really considering the emotional implications of things. But all that happened was he seemed very flat and very muted, and Vanessa Kirby was the same. She almost seemed kind of, I didn't buy into, and I didn't believe their relationship, even though we had kind of a fair few shots of them kind of canoodling and cuddling right at the front of the film. Didn't buy into that. Joseph Quinn ends up taking on the role of the kind of comic foil. He's like the teenager in the family. He's a bit kind of hyperactive. You know, he's the one who kind of falls in love with Silver Surfer when she comes into the film a bit later, or becomes obsessed with her, thinks she's sexy. Ebon Moss-Bachrach, who spends most of the film in The Thing, kind of, I guess, CGI fucking green screened face. He was by far the warmest and the most real. And I felt that there were sort of moments of introspection even. I felt there was more introspection in his rocky kind of gnarly face when he was kind of, you know, is he in love with the woman who runs the school? And when he sees her at the synagogue later, is he, you know, what's the connection there? It's not talked about, but you feel it, you know, and all that kind of, you see him wandering around the kind of downtown streets of New York, and, you know, he's kind of part of the community, you feel it and all that kind of stuff. But I think my problem with this film was I didn't buy into their ensemble. I didn't feel that there was a good vibe going on between the four of them. And I think the reason that's really kind of thrown into sharp relief in superhero films now, it's not to say this should have been like Guardians of the Galaxy, but when you've had films like The Avengers, Guardians of the Galaxy, and, you know, you often get these ensemble teams or groups of superheroes, even Thunderbolts, the bar is really high. The bar has been set really high for interactivity in the group, joshing, laughter, connection, love, nuance, emotion. And I have to confess, I felt in every single four-shot scene in this, where the four of them were together, there was a sense of disconnection. Like they weren't all really getting on as well as they could have, should have, and you thought they would have. So that was a major problem for me right at the beginning of the film. It then moves into quite sort of standard superhero kind of stuff. I quite liked the nature of the dilemma in this film. I mean, it kind of pivots back to, I've always said I hate the superhero films that just end up with cities blowing up and imploding and planets going boom and multiverses. There's no multiverses in here, kind of. But there's definitely planet consumption. I mean, that's what Galacticus does. Galacticus eats planets, and Ralph Ineson's voice, I think they could have done with Ralph Ineson sort of holding on to his northern drawl rather than it being sort of echoey. I think that would have been nice. So, you know, Galacticus eats planets. He's the eater of planets. And there's something in that that's sort of vaguely stupid and ridiculous. But I like that. That, for me, was the kind of concept that when I was a kid and I ran back up Blenheim Crescent with a comic under my arm. Wow, I'm going to go and read this comic in the back garden or in my room or on the toilet. And fucking hell, this villain, he eats planets, man. I quite liked it. I quite like it as an idea. But of course, we are introduced to the Silver Surfer. So, you know, whilst as our erstwhile Fantastic Four, she's got pregnant, she's going to have a baby. So the Silver Surfer comes down to Earth, basically surfs in, played by Julia Garner. They've genderfied her. She's a she, and she's quite, yeah, I can see why the Thing would like a thing with the Silver Surfer. She's quite, yeah, okay, shiny. Anyway, so she comes in, tells everyone basically, clear out, sort your shit out. Any minute now, Galacticus is going to come in. He's really fucking hungry. He's got a terrible kind of hunger. His tummy's rumbling, and he wants to chomp through your planet, basically. So she gives them a warning, and of course, Fantastic Four go, fucking hell, this is no good. We need to get... So they head off into space, and they're like, well, we've got to go and find this fucking Galactus. But they're going to... My problem also with them going into space was, for the first sort of act of this film, Vanessa Kirby is pregnant. And I was thinking all sorts of things like air pressure. I was thinking about oxygen intake. I was thinking about radiation from the flight, from the moon, from the sun. This isn't a good... You shouldn't become a space explorer with a great big baby in your tummy or in your womb. But she does. They do. They head off. They have a confrontation with Galacticus. And so once they've met Galacticus in space, and basically Galacticus says, that's right, yeah, no, so she has a baby in fucking space. I have to say, the baby thing, I wasn't buying the baby thing. And the baby thing, again, is so The Incredibles. I realise The Incredibles is inspired by this. I didn't want the baby thing at all. The baby thing got in the way of it, because I tell you what it ended up doing. It ended up neutering. Not that there's anything unsuperhero-y about being a mum. Quite the opposite. Most mums are superheroes. But I felt it neutered Vanessa Kirby. I felt it neutered Sue Storm's narrative arc. She was so sort of preoccupied, understandably, with giving birth to a baby. I mean, at one point they were talking about the dilation of a portal or a black hole. And she says, is it going to dilate? One of my problems, I think, and I think this might have been one of the other problems with the whole ensemble not working for me, was I don't think this was particularly well written. It was very functional. It was very top level, so that, not that you want subtext or anything, but there was nothing else to what they said. I mean, for example, you know, you'd have scenes where someone would say something like, well, I think what we need to do is travel to see Galactus, and they would actually cut to someone nodding. Yeah, I mean, come on, we could be more economic than that. You don't need to say literally what we're doing and then have someone confirm it with an, oh, why not? Just either have a funny line or have a different line or go deep or do something. Give us some more information. Really quite obvious story arc choices here, and I wonder whether in no small way Pedro Pascal and Vanessa Kirby and Joseph Quinn and Ebon were all slightly flummoxed perhaps by how simplistic the dialogue was. And it's, you know, because I think the story and the narrative arc of the film and the three acts and what we're dealing with here is part of its nostalgia. You've got the set, you've got the production design, you've got the clothing here. You've also got a really quite sort of standard, quite simple, you know, planet-chomping monster. Great, and that all works, and that kind of chimes with the new sort of nostalgia we've all got in the cinema for old superhero films. But then you just had some really quite, I think, really insipid, really dry, really unimaginative dialogue scenes where it was just functional. It was like table tennis, rather than actually adding anything to character development. And where you had a few moments, I mean, as I say, the few moments where I can think that I can think about where you sort of spent time with them, not for ages. I'm not talking about you need ages, but like, you know, I felt I got a sense of the Thing just in the couple of scenes of him wandering around and talking to that woman in the school, you know. So we get told a little bit of a backstory to Silver Surfer, because she essentially was in a similar predicament to what they all find themselves in on Earth. And then the film throws at us the biggest narrative bomb that's the kind of, oh, this is the dilemma. This is the critical kind of, what would you do if I was in that position? Basically, Galacticus says, I won't eat your planet if you give me your baby. Tough choice, because of course Vanessa doesn't want to give him the baby. It's her baby. think I felt a few moments where perhaps, you know, the Human Torch and the Thing were like, could save everyone. Understandably, you know, Pedro Pascal, you know, Mr. Fantastic, he's kind of like, he doesn't want to give the baby, but he's trying to think of the right solution because he's kind of, you know, he's really serious. I mean, basically, he's really boring. And that is a problem for Pedro Pascal, because Pedro Pascal is not boring. I think Pedro needed a more playful role. Or they just needed to make Mr. Fantastic a bit more playful. Anyway, so who's going to hand their baby over to a great big planet-munching monster called Galactus? I mean, I'll tell you, well, when you get back to Earth, not surprisingly, all the population of the planet go, why the fuck haven't you given them your baby? And I was with the population of the planet, if I'm honest, because it's like, so the rest of the film is really them using the baby as bait. And I quite like that. I thought, wow, using the baby as bait, that's quite something. But again, I don't even think they made more sort of, I thought they could have made more dramatic or comedic sort of, they could have mined that for more comedy or more drama even. I thought we could have had a more intense exploration of what this meant for, you know, for Pedro and Vanessa Kirby's characters. But it's like everything was like they made a choice, they made a decision, and then they got on with that decision. And again, I suppose that's very like the old comics. You know, there's not much time for kind of character analysis, but I think this film needed a little bit more character. And if it didn't need more character, it needed more interconnected characterization between them. I think one of the strengths when the Avengers is so strong, when Guardians is so strong, is the kind of, if you like, even if it's not funny, it doesn't have to be funny. I'm not saying this has to be like Guardians, but even when there's history, you just want to buy into the history of the relationship between the characters. And in this, they all felt like they'd only just met on set, if I'm honest, and they'd only just got cracking with the film. So moving through some of the things, so I thought Galactus was interesting. He was cool. It was quite a good design. There's a lovely moment where Galactus grabs some trees, I think from Prospect Park at the bottom part of New York, and sniffs it. And he has a little look at one point at the Statue of Liberty. I was wondering whether he was going to knock it aside, you know. I thought Galactus was good. Ralph Ineson's voice gave it sort of gravitas. Julia Garner was good. I mean, the jury's out for me on Julia Garner. I find her quite a sort of inexpressive and sort of quite one note. I mean, which is good in Ozark, but I've not seen her kind of ignite in anything else. And of course, she's not helped here with that sort of slightly glacial, inexpressive poker face, because her face is literally silvered up. It's kind of enameled. But she was good. You know, we saw her backstory. We got a sense that she too had her planet eaten. So she had history. She's been abused by Galactus, which in itself then leads us to the end of the film, which really is down to kind of the Silver Surfer. Joseph Quinn as the Human Torch. Yeah, it was good. We know he's an incredibly versatile, incredibly clever actor, an intelligent performer in sort of franchisey stuff as well. He was incredibly nuanced and detailed and real and grainy in character in the Quiet Day, Day One, or whatever it was, Quiet Place, Day One. We know Pedro Pascal can be good. I mean, I do worry that Pedro's slightly been we've had oversaturation, perhaps. I don't know. I'm not that excited about the Materialists that he's in as well, which is coming out soon. Vanessa Kirby is quite icy and quite sort of Ice Maiden-y. We loved her in The Crown. I've seen her pop up in things like Mission Impossible. Again, I'm not entirely convinced this is the right vehicle for the kind of actress she is. There must have been a moment where she was sort of struggling to give birth to Franklin in the spaceship, where she was thinking she was not. In fact, she was really good. I think she was nominated for an Oscar, wasn't she? In the film where she had a home birth. She was. See, there you go. She was incredibly good in that film. I mean, it was almost a one-take, real-time birthing situation, but she was sensational in that. So we know they're all good actors. So it's got nothing to do with that. And Ebon is always, he was great in The Bear. I mean, if nothing else, you know, he's an incredibly sort of energetic and energized performer. And I do have to say, of all the characters in this, I think The Thing was the most successful. And he was the one with the fucking green screen face on. And I didn't feel enough was made of the oddity of them all living together. I mean, there was got a nice scene at the front where The Thing is kind of cooking and all that. But again, it looked great. And I have to say, I think for me, what carried me to the end of this film was just how brilliantly it looked. The fusion, with a couple of exceptions actually. There was a moment where they jumped out of one of the cars and you thought, oh, the rendering on that car pulling up and them all jumping out is a bit dodgy. By and large, though, I would say this film was really successful at fusing real life, you know, physical props and production design with green screen and CGI stuff. I thought it was really neat. I'm not smitten with their superpowers. They weren't convincing. So when they were trying to battle Galactus and, you know, the thing is picking up a crane, you just know that's not going to do anything. And then you know, Sue Storm, she's driving a car and you sort of, oh, that's all right. I just didn't get as much as I was hoping for from 4 really good actors. I was really looking forward to crisp dialogue, not just funny, but, you know, interesting exchanges between them all, you know, intense relationships. I didn't feel any intensity and I didn't feel any comedy. I felt they were reaching for the one-line jokes about Joseph Quinn fancying, you know, the Silver Surfer. It just fell short for me there. But it very much is a sort of comic book story. And to that extent, I think maybe that's why it's succeeding. You don't feel you're watching a film that's sat within an incredibly ornate and complex wall chart of Phase 7 of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I didn't need my guidebook. I wasn't having to refer outwards, and I think that's a huge breath of fresh air. And I think that, again, is something that was good with Superman, is yes, of course, it's there if you want it. I know, Nina, you gave me lots of Easter eggs to kind of look out for, some of the original cast members in there and what have you. But for me, that wasn't, you know, what I liked about this, though I didn't like a great deal, what I did like about it was that it was sort of a self-enclosed story. I'm sure it's definitely going to reach out, because in the intertitles we get a clear reference to the incoming Doctor Doom. Now look, Marvel, if you ever need a younger Iron Man, Joseph Quinn is the spitting image of Robert Downey Jr. Sometimes it feels like you're looking at him. Just cast him as a young Iron Man and you can resurrect that whole fucking franchise. So all in all, you know, weirdly looked brilliant. A feast for the eyes, a non-challenging story, not complex, didn't reach beyond this film. It was all enclosed. It's quite a simple kind of, it was a simple dilemma. Do we give our kid to the evil bastard? What I'd like to know, though, is what was he going to do with the baby? He did seem to be suggesting, Galactus, that give me the baby and I can be spared of the weight of my hunger. I mean, maybe it is quite exhausting having to eat planets. And if maybe he hands the reins over to a baby, the baby just has to eat trees or something like that. So all in all, visually, great in every aspect. Story-wise, kind of all right. Script, really disappointing. And interactivity and ensembleness of the 4, really, really quite disappointing, if I'm honest. So if I was to score this, I'm really, really quite contrarian to the Rotten Tomatoes. Nowhere near do I think this deserves 89% or 96%. I think the audience score is. I'd give this, I'll be giving this 68 out of 100.